Powerlifting isn't just for young guys trying to push bigger and bigger numbers. It's a powerful tool for men over 40 to stay strong, relevant, and in control as they get older. In today's video, I'm going to cover 6 specific ways that powerlifting can help men over 40 to live longer and stay sharp mentally and physically into their 50s and beyond. Make sure to check back for future videos where I'm going to be going into deeper, more detail in each of these 6 benefits. Hey guys, my name is Aaron Kubitz, founder of Functional Aesthetics of Eau Claire, where I blend science and innovation to help busy guys in their 40 build muscle, shed fat, and perform better inside and outside the gym. Alright, so before we dive in, let's do a little bit of a background with my history with powerlifting. So from age 11 to about 16 years old, I was very involved in distance running, did a lot of cross-country type of stuff, and ended up ultimately burning myself out once and then also injuring my lower back. So at one point I was running 50 to 60 plus miles a week in doing the distance running stuff. Then I injured my back, and so I was looking for ways to stay in shape while I was recovering from that. At first I started doing some biking, and then the roads were covered with snow, and so I started lifting weights. My dad had been a power lifter when he was in the Marine Corps, and so he showed me the basics of how to bench press and do all the basic lifts. I soon fell in love with getting bigger and stronger. I went from 145 pounds bench pressing about 95 pounds all the way up to 165 pounds and bench pressing 225 in just about a year and a half time period. And that's really when my love affair with strength training began. Over the years, I departed from the powerlifting a little bit, actually as a part of getting really sick with gut health issues, parasites, gut bacteria imbalances. I didn't know what the issues were at the time. Back in the early 2000s, there wasn't a lot of talk about this. But as a result of that, I lost 30 pounds of muscle mass. This led me into natural bodybuilding later on, and then later on down the road into the creation of something I called hybrid strength training, which is the combination of powerlifting, bodybuilding, high rep calisthenics training, and then some explosive or more athletic style of training, which might include Olympic lifting, box jump, sprinting, sled pushing, things of that nature. This hybrid style of training forms the basis for my online program, Hybrid Strength 101, which is a 16-week strength and conditioning program designed to help guys in their 40s to build 5 to 10 pounds of lean muscle and drop 15 to 20 plus pounds of body fat while increasing their overall athleticism. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can go down and check it out in the links in the comments, in the description for this video. Alright, so what are these 6 benefits of powerlifting? Well, first off, and probably most obvious, is strength and muscular development. So with powerlifting, you are obviously going to get much stronger. Now, powerlifting is not as good at building muscle mass as something like bodybuilding, because one of the key drivers of building more muscle is volume, which is not just the amount of weight on the bar, but the total amount of weight that you are lifting in a workout session. So in essence, the more work you do, provided that you have enough, you can recover from it, and you're getting adequate nutrition, you're getting the right nutrients, enough protein, and the right enough fat to support your hormones, and then enough carbohydrates to support the amount of work that you're doing, with a little bit of extra calories to make sure that you are not just going in a deficit or just maintaining. Then in general, then the more work you're doing, you will build more muscle. On the other hand, powerlifting tends to build the size of the actual muscle fibers, which is a much slower process, and you're also not going to build as much muscle. But you can build some muscle with the powerlifting, but it's better to preface it with some bodybuilding work, which is what we actually do inside of the Hybrid Strength program. Now, powerlifting, though, is superior to bodybuilding for just raw maximal strength. And it's not to say that a bodybuilder is going to be weak. So like, if you think about back in the day, Arnold Schwarzenegger's best friend and training partner, Franco Columbu, was one of the strongest guys in the world at the time in his weight category. And he competed in both bodybuilding and powerlifting. And this was actually fairly common, at least up until the late 60s, where guys would do their weightlifting and then they would do like a posing thing after they finished their lifting, versus having it in two separate categories, which became much more prevalent towards the end of the 60s and the early 70s and going forward as people began to specialize much more in their sports. So it's not to say that a bodybuilder can't be just as strong, if not stronger, than these powerlifters, because you often see a guy, let's say like this Anatoly guy that you see a lot on the internet, right, who's a relatively small guy. I think he weighs maybe 185 pounds, and he's moving some pretty impressive poundages. He does competitive powerlifting, right, but he will oftentimes do these gym pranks where he has these big bodybuilder guys and he's, deadlifting whatever they're deadlifting and stuff, even though he's, 30, 40, 50 pounds lighter than they are. And it's not because the bodybuilders don't have the potential. In fact, the bigger the muscle is, you have a greater potential to build strength, but strength is a skill. If you are not training specifically for strength, as bodybuilders aren't, then you are not going to develop that maximal strength. Now, if you had a bodybuilder and he's training his bodybuilding stuff, and then he goes and starts training in that 1 to 5 rep max, and he starts doing, partials and working the lockout and different powerlifting techniques, he can most certainly become incredibly strong with those bigger muscles. But since bodybuilding tends to be more about accumulated volume, right, and how much work can you put in, then they're generally not training at those high intensities, whereas a powerlifter might be training somewhere between 85 to 90% of or like an 8 or 9 RPE a lot, or 80 to 90% of their 1 rep max quite frequently. Bodybuilder is going to be more on that 70 to maybe 80% of 1 rep max for higher repetitions, which is not going to develop that neural drive to the same degree. All right, next benefit is bone and connective tissue health. So one of the reasons, paradoxically, right, that a lot of guys in their 40s and their 50s shy away from powerlifting style training or heavier lifting is because they're afraid of injuring themselves. They're afraid of damaging their joints. Maybe they already have some pre-existing injuries. If you do, there's definitely things we can do to work around that. Maybe, and there are some certain circumstances where it's contraindicated to do heavy lifting. If you've had like joint replacements or things like that, you might want to go away from that a little bit, right? But the one thing, so all forms of strength training are going to strengthen your bones. I mean, even running, any sort of weight-bearing activities are going to strengthen your bones. They're going to strengthen your connective tissues. But between bodybuilding, calisthenics or body weight types training, and aerobic exercise, powerlifting is going to give you the most bang for your buck in terms of developing really strong, dense bones and connective tissues, provided you're getting the adequate nutrients to stimulate that, right? You can do all the breakdown in the gym, but the gym is just the stimulus, and if you don't have enough rest and nutrition to ensure that compensation, that adaptation to your training occurs, then you will break down rather than building up. But I think at this point, most of us understand that point. So I was recently reading an old book from the 90s. I think it's a fairly popular book in the strength training circles called Dinosaur Training. I think the guy's last name is Kubik or something. And he's talking about how the old time lifters, i.e. the dinosaurs, right, from the early 1900s up to the 1960s or so, pre steroid era, right? How these guys used to train, right? These guys used to lift with sandbags and barrels and anvils and heavy beams and awkward objects and stuff, and they would also train with thick bars and those kind of things. And they would also not do these pump-up workouts where they'd be doing lots of reps and sets like you do in a bodybuilding workout, right? They would typically work in with sets of 5, sets of 3, and even numerous sets of heavy singles where you start off, you do 1, slap on some more weight, 1, slap on some more weight, and then you get up to that as quickly as possible, getting up to that really heavy set where you can barely lift it up. You know, the same thing when you're doing curls, lifting that weight until the bar literally falls out of your hand because it's too hard. And the thing he was saying is that when you're lifting these odd objects, when you're lifting with a thick bar, when you're pushing with really heavy weights, when you're going in the squat rack, right? I don't have one of these set up here like this. Mine is all taken apart on the floor over there. But when you have, at most commercial gyms, you'll have these things called your safety pins coming out, right? So you have the rack where the bar sets, and then you can set your safety pins below that. And so what they would do is you'd practice like partials, right? So for example, you're starting from, let's say, here, and then you're pressing just up to there, just a couple inches, and then over time you're increasing that range of motion over time so that you're able to break a plateau rather than doing the full range of motion the whole time. Maybe you start out doing a quick warm-up set, then you do some partials, and then after you've done the partials, maybe do some full range of motion stuff too. But if you've been stuck at a certain weight and you're overhead pressed for a while, then you can just work that sticking point with where it's overloaded, and so you only have to move it at like an inch in the beginning, right? And then maybe the next week you, if you're able, you increase it another inch, and then maybe you get stuck, and so you have to stay there for a while. But anyway, working that, and he said the thing is with those that these guys had really, really, really strong tendons and connective tissues because of taking the time to build that up. Muscle tissue is going to grow a lot faster than connective tissue. So when you are trying to build up connective tissue strength, when you're trying to work your way into heavy lifting, you want to take it slowly. It's not that guys in your 40s and your 50s, even your 60s and 70s can't lift heavy weights or shouldn't lift heavy weights because it's going to be damaging to their joints. And in fact, the opposite is true. You're actually going to improve the health of your cartilage. You're going to improve the strength of your tendons, your ligaments, but you can't get into it super fast. Like, you can build muscle a lot faster with these bodybuilding routines, but when it comes to strengthening tendons and ligaments, take your time. This is another reason why in my hybrid strength program, we start off with high volume calisthenic style training, right? Or even just light barbell work in the higher repetition ranges, and then we're slowly increasing that intensity over time so that by the time you get to the powerlifting sections of the program, your tendons and ligaments are fully prepared to handle those heavy loads and reap the benefits as a result. All right, so the third benefit of powerlifting has to do with your hormones. Now, you probably heard that lifting heavy weights is going to help to jack up your testosterone levels. Yes, powerlifting is going to help your testosterone levels. Now, it's not like something like TRT where your testosterone is going to stay pretty stable all the time. You're going to get a short-term transient spike in testosterone, and then it's going to start dissipating over time after that. So that's why it's important that you want to stay relatively active, give yourself frequent little spikes of this testosterone, but overall, your testosterone levels are going to be better from lifting heavy weights on a consistent basis. Now, it's also going to help to improve growth hormone, albeit not to the same extent that either bodybuilding or high repetition endurance style training will. This is because powerlifting is shorter term, higher intensity, whereas growth hormone tends to be released, as I talked about in last week's video, when you have an oxygen debt, when you are in a more catabolic state from a prolonged period of stressing the body, when there's more metabolic stress going on from higher repetitions, shorter rest periods, lower oxygen state, growth hormone tends to be elevated, and this is just not the sort of environment that you're getting from powerlifting. But the other thing that powerlifting is going to do is going to increase your insulin sensitivity. Now, insulin is that master hormone. It's going to affect pretty much all the other hormones in your body, including your sex hormones like testosterone and your growth hormone, right? So if you are insulin insensitive or otherwise metabolically unhealthy, levels of blood sugar rise. As the blood sugars rise, you need more and more insulin to help get that sugar into the cells and out of the bloodstream. When insulin levels are chronically elevated, it tends to drive up levels of estradiol, and that tends to convert your free testosterone, the most important form of testosterone for building muscle, into basically what it does is it converts it into estrogen through something called aromatization, right? So it aromatizes your free testosterone, converts it into estrogen, and so if you can improve your insulin sensitivity, it means that you're going to need less insulin to do the job to get the sugar out of the blood and into your muscle cells for energy, which is going to help to improve your overall hormonal profile. So before you think about doing something like TRT, taking testosterone boosters, anything like that, first thing you need to be doing is ensuring that you are doing the basics. Are you cleaning up your diet? Have you lost enough body fat? If your body fat is too high, you're going to increase estrogen production, right? Which is going to then convert more free testosterone into more estrogen, which is going to lead to more fat gain, which is going to lead to more estrogen, and it's this vicious cycle. So in the beginning, it may be very difficult to bring that down if your hormones are out of whack. But once you get those levels down, you are eating a proper diet that is devoid of processed carbs. You're getting enough fat, especially things like olive oil, coconut oil, avocados, some walnuts, things like that. Make sure you do these in some moderation in relation to your total overall calories, but it's keeping your total fat intake between 30 to 45% of your overall calories and not below 20% of overall calories, and then getting your carbohydrates, timing those at smart times when you're going to need them. So that's going to be before your workouts. If you're doing a high volume workout, you're going to need a little bit more carbs, especially if you're doing stuff like legs, you're working your back. When you're working those bigger muscle groups, carbohydrates become a lot more important. You need more energy to do those. And then after the workout, to replace muscle glycogen. The rest of the time, especially if you are above 15% body fat, even if you are at 15% body fat, I would recommend this too, but if you're on the leaner end, then not so much. But if you are above 15% body fat, completely recommend that. Most of the time you're getting your carbohydrates from vegetables, right? So broccoli, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, bell peppers, green, leafy greens, things like that. And then getting some healthy fats, getting some protein. If that's not really doing it for you after you've had those things, like you've had the protein, you've had the salad, you've had the fats, then go ahead and have a starch portion, but do it based upon your performance. If your performance in the gym is suffering from a lack of carbohydrates, then by all means add those carbohydrates back in, but do it as needed, not just because this feels good to eat this thing. Because one thing is carbohydrates are very addictive. So you can also stay pretty lean going on a low-fat diet, right, and have the carbohydrates a little higher. You can have moderate carbs, high protein. The only thing is that when dietary fats are 20% or below, testosterone levels tend to be a little bit lower. So if you're concerned about keeping testosterone high, you want to ensure that you are getting around 30% of your total calories from dietary fats. All right, so coming in at number 4, we have athletic and functional fitness. So athletic performance and functional fitness. Athletic performance should come as no surprise. Most football teams, most team sports are going to include things like squats, deadlifts, and power cleans into their routine. And it's obvious because the reason it's obvious is because it's going to make you a stronger individual. Now, there does come a point of diminishing returns where trying to get stronger, because like the stronger you get, there's theoretically no ceiling on how much muscle and strength you can build, but it does really, really, really slow down after the first couple of years of consistent training. And so the amount of time you need to do these advanced strength training routines to get that little bit of extra strength would take time away from training for sport-specific skills, which would make you worse at your sport. So yes, strength and to a lesser degree, muscle is going to help you perform better at your sport, right? Especially if you're in power type sports, track and field, football, basketball, things like that, wrestling, right? But after a certain point, the additional time required to get those little extra gains in strength is not going to be worth it to improving your overall performance in your sport. Now, you might be wondering about the functional fitness thing, right? So how is squatting, especially if you've seen things like functional patterns, right? So functional patterns is where they're all talking about you need to be able to run, sprint, and jump, right? And doing bilateral exercises like squats and deadlifts, it doesn't really teach you how to do stuff when you're on one leg and coordinate everything like that. Now, here's the thing. Function means functional for that activity. So the best way to develop strength and power is in a stable environment, right? If you are on one leg, now you're taking into consideration things like balance, right? And the proprioception, which are important in sports and in life, right? But when your brain's focused more on balancing, it can't be focused on delivering the most amount of force into the barbell or into the object that you are moving against, right? So for this reason, if you want to train for strength, be in a stable environment. The best way to do that, when you're like deadlifting, right? Very stable environment. 2 feet, got a barbell, lift the thing straight up and down. Very stable, best way to develop that strength in the posterior chain. Same thing with the bench press. You know, with a push-up, it's very functional because you got the stabilization, you have to use your core and everything like that. You got the scapular control, but because you have the instability component, you can't overload it as effectively as you can when you're laying on a bench and you just have to push it straight up and down. So if you're trying to build more muscle in your chest, if you're trying to build maximal strength, using a bench press is going to be much better, right? So same thing when it comes to a squat. You know, squat's going to develop much more strength than doing a lunge. Now, what my take is to have the squat, deadlift, and the bench press, overhead pressing, pull-ups, rowing, have those as your base for your workouts. And then go and train the skill work stuff. Do the sprinting, do the jumping, do the rotational stuff, right? A lot of those rotational movements, you know, where you're grabbing a cable down here or something like that, pushing it up here, you're, you know, grabbing a weight. One of my favorite exercises is to do a corkscrew, where you grab like a weight plate or a medicine ball or even a rock, and you hold it down here. You come down to one side like this, and then you twist up and you push it that way. Excellent exercise to train not only the abs, but also the connection between the butt and your lower back, and then going up into the arms. Very athletic movement. So definitely should be doing all these rotational movements, but not in lieu of your strength building movements, squat, deadlift, overhead press, because those ones are going to be the most functional for developing maximal strength and muscle. All right, so coming in at number 5, we've got the psychological or mental benefits of powerlifting. So intense lifting like sprinting, jumping, lifting heavy weights is going to help to lower cortisol and stress in the long term. It's going to help to increase levels of feel-good hormones like dopamine, serotonin, and it's going to make you feel more confident in your ability to move a lot of weight. You don't feel fragile, right? You don't feel like you're breakable, right? And there's also evidence that, which I will be talking about in a future video in more depth, that it can help to delay cognitive decline as well as we get older. Now, you might be a little bit confused here if you watch a prior video where I was talking about how powerlifting can actually increase cortisol, and then that muscular endurance training can help to combat that, right? So now you might be thinking, okay, he's contradicting himself here. He's saying on the one hand that powerlifting is going to increase your cortisol, and then that muscular endurance training can help to bring that down. That's why you should blend the two together to have the one so that you're recovering from the other. And that is true, right? But here's the catch. Cortisol, powerlifting increases cortisol levels in the short term, but with proper recovery and nutrition, that cortisol is going to come back down to baseline pretty quickly. The reason cortisol goes up is because cortisol is that glucocorticoid hormone, right? Glucose being the base of the root of that word, meaning that it helps to mobilize or release carbohydrates from storage into your system to be used for energy in the workout. That's the reason the cortisol is going up, right? Now, when you're periodically exposing yourself to that short-term stress, right? Long-term stress is what's detrimental, right? If cortisol levels are up all the time, then that's what becomes a problem. But when you frequently expose yourself to short-term stress followed by rest and recovery, it actually makes your body and your mind more resilient, which means that in everyday life, you're going to be more resilient to stress at the office, at work, at home, and road rage on the out on the road, right? So that short-term stress is going to make your body and your mind more resilient. Last benefit of powerlifting is the one that gets a bigger and bigger concern as we get older, in our 40s, 50s, and beyond. And that is longevity and quality of life as we get older. Personally, living long is fine. But what I care about more is how do I feel during that time. So one of the best things that you can do to prevent the decline as you get older, right, is to start lifting. Start taking care of your body now. I've heard so many guys and even women say, when I retire, then I'll start working out more because I'll have more time. Reality is, it doesn't take that much time. In fact, in my hybrid strength program, we work out 20 to 30 minutes per day and you get excellent results doing this. And numerous guys hit their 20 pounds, sometimes even more. One guy, he went from 14% body fat, got himself down to 10% body fat in about 4 months with this program. So as we get older, muscle and strength, it's still possible to build it, right? But it becomes harder. So the best time to start, the best way to go about it is to start in your 30s. Heck, if you even started earlier, right? But if you start in your 30s, your 40s, even your 50s, it's never too late to start. But don't think that, okay, I will start when I'm 65. Because if you're tired and you feel like you don't have time now, the other thing I always hear guys say is, I'm more busy now that I'm retired than I was when I worked, right? So there's never the perfect time to do it. It's going to give you more energy so that you can be more effective and get more out of the time that you do have because you're a healthier individual. It's not about having more time, it's about being more effective with the time that you do have. And so if you start in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, and build up as much muscle and strength as you can then, it's going to help you to have a larger buffer to slow down that inevitable decline that is going to happen once you start hitting your 70s and so on and so forth. And this includes the cognitive benefits, preventing things like dementia, which I'm going to be talking about in a future video. So a healthy person has many dreams, right? But a sick person only has one. And that desire or dream of the sick person is that they would be well. So health really is the most important thing that you have. If your health is gone, your brain starts going, right? You can't get out and experience things, right? If your health is gone, the mind starts going with it, everything starts deteriorating from there. So even your ability to read books, your ability to learn new information as you get older, right? To be able to get out there and spend time with the grandkids, to go out on those hikes, to enjoy the vacations that you didn't have time for when you were working and raising children, right? So spend that, 20 to 30 minutes a day. Heck, if you don't feel like you have the time to do that now, here's a simple exercise you can do. This is a little tip I'm going to offer you for this video here. Is figure out what workout you would do, and you don't even have to have the weights to do it to start, right? Just take each exercise in those workouts, split them up across the entire week. So if that's 2, maybe 3 exercises a day, maybe it's 2 exercises a day, maybe it's 1 exercise a day, right? And you're just going to do 1 set of 20 reps of that exercise. That'll take you less than 60 seconds to do that. Less than 60 seconds, okay? And if you just do 1 exercise per day, 60 seconds per day, and then the next week, try to increase the weight. So if you don't have weights at home, go out and grab a rock or something. Put on a backpack with some books in it. Put on a weighted vest. Anything you can do to make it a little heavier. go out and build a sandbag, right? Have little packets that you can take in and take out, maybe 5 to 10 pound bags of sand that you pile it up into a bigger duffel bag, and then just lift that thing. Do all your different exercises, starting out with 20 reps and then slowly increasing that weight. And as you increase the weight, the reps will come down. Once you get down to where you are getting like 10 reps in a set, then add another set to get yourself and slowly start building yourself back up to a total of 20 reps between your sets. It's super simple, right? Now you think you don't have the time, but if you follow this, I guarantee that you're going to find an extra, that over time you're going to realize as your energy increases, as your fitness increases, you're going to realize that you have an extra 20, 30, and I would even dare say an extra hour every day that you can devote to your health and fitness. All right, guys, that's all for today's video. Hopefully you got a lot of benefit out of this video. If you want to stay strong, healthy, and viable into your 50s and beyond, consider following this series that I'm going to be doing on the benefits of powerlifting. I'm going to do another series on the benefits of power training, which is a little bit different. That's about explosivity, speed, power, and agility. We're also going to be talking about those things. If you are interested in learning how to eat for whether building muscle, shedding body fat, how to avoid getting injuries when you're in the gym so that you can stay fit for as long as possible, or if you do get an injury, how to work around that injury, consider subscribing to the channel by hitting the button in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, and I'll see you all next time for more health and fitness information.